of a Broadway stage. His second novel, Karaoke Queen, is out on September 17, 2024. So it's just was released recently. He is a member of the Writers Grotto and co-hosts the long-running Babylon Salon reading and performance series in San Francisco. Dominic holds a Master's of Music from Indiana University's Jacobs School of Music, is an alumnus of Oberlin College and Conservatory of Music, and has sung with numerous professional early music and choral ensembles. In fact, Dominic sang for his first book launch, so very impressive. He's also a proud member of Actors Equity Association. He has performed off-Broadway and in regional productions throughout the US. He works as a paralegal for a Bay Area biotech company and lives in Oakland with his loving and supportive husband, Peter, and their whiny cat, Phoebe. Hi, Dominic.
Hi.
So now I will be introducing Susan. Susan Kiyo Ito is the author of award-winning memoir, I Would Meet You Anywhere, which is also for sale here, if you're interested. It was a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award, and she co-edited the literary anthology of A Ghost at Heart's Edge, Stories and Poems of Adoption. Her work has appeared in The Writer, Growing Up Asian American, Choice, Hip Mama, Literary Mama, Catapult, Hyphen, the Bellevue Literary Review, and elsewhere. She is a MacDowell Colony Fellow and has also been awarded residencies at the Mesa Refuge, Hedgebrook, and the Blue Mountain Center. She has performed her solo show, The Ice Cream Gene, around the US. Her theatrical adaptation of Untold Stories of Reproductive Stigma was produced at Brava Theater. She's a member of the Writers Grotto and teaches at Mills College, Northeastern University, and Bay Path University. She was one of the co-organizers of Rooted and Written. Yes, without Susan, we may not be here today, among other people, a no-fee writing workshop for writers of color. She lives in Northern California. She will be in conversation with Dominic right now. Welcome both.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rowena. Okay, so before we begin, I just wanted to say what a privilege it is to moderate this keynote speech with you, Susan. I know we are colleagues and we are friends, but you are also the person at the Grotto who first took me under your wing when I first got there as a fellow in 2020. And you encouraged me to be involved. You encouraged me to step up and teach a class at Rooted and Written. And you were there for me when I struggled through the difficulties I had while being on the board as well. So I just want to say you're someone that I look up to and who I strive to be like in so many ways as both an author and a person. So I'm so happy that we get to have this discussion today.
Oh, Dominic, thank you.
Susan, your memoir, I Would Meet You Anywhere, was one of my very favorite reads of last year, and certainly one of my favorite memoirs, along with Grace Lowe Prasad's The Translator's Daughter, who I want to give a quick shout out here. I was so pulled into your story of the difficult search for your birth parents, and I know that it was a long journey for you to write the book. You mentioned in your preface, over 30 years. So can you talk a little bit about where it started? How did you start writing the book? How did you end up settling on memoir as a genre? And what were some of the roadblocks you hit along the way?
Oh, there are so many roadblocks. I don't think we have enough time to talk about all the roadblocks, but I'll try to summarize. I started writing the book as my MFA thesis in fiction back. I graduated in 1994 with an MFA from Mills College. And at the time I thought, oh, I'll just finish this up, polish it a little bit, and it'll be good to go in a year or two. Well, haha. Right. As it turned out, that was not so easy. And part of it was writing the book as fiction. As I revised after my graduation, I probably did 2 or 3 full book drafts as either linked short stories or a novel. And each time I revised it, it became more and more disguised and
Mhm.
more and more like I was really trying to protect myself and others. So I kept adding layers and layers of disguise. And it ended up, I kind of use this analogy of like looking like one of those sports team mascots where there's like a little tiny person inside and then there's like a giant tiger or bear or something. And it's so
Uh-huh.
you can barely walk, but the real true story and the true person is really tiny inside. And I
Mm.
started to feel like the story was getting lost in all the disguise, you know?
Right.
So, and in the meantime, because I was writing about, I'll just go back and summarize a little bit. So I
Yeah.
was adopted as a baby. I'm biracial, half Japanese, half European American, and I was adopted by Japanese American parents. And so that, and then I was searching for my birth family. So that's kind of the premise of the whole thing.
Mhm.
And I was living a lot of the story as I was trying to write it. And every time something happened in my quote unquote real life, it would shift the narrative like
Wow.
dramatically. It's like, oh no, now I have to change this, or now I have to do this. And often I had to um I had to step away from it because I became afraid of the material. It was hard to write about. It was hard to live through. And so I would take either months or years where I was like, I can't do this. And then I would start working on something else completely different and then come back to it feeling this kind of inexorable pull, like I have to write about it. I can't write about it. I have to write about it. I can't write about it. It was this tug of war between feeling this great pull that I need to write about it, feeling like I couldn't.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I eventually I ended up uh, doing it as a solo performance piece and
Right.
performing it around the country. And weirdly, that felt less vulnerable to me than writing it, as a memoir. And then
Hmm.
I can't even explain why. Well, I can explain why. I mean, part of it is that when I was performing it in a theater on a stage, my audience was right there with me and I knew who they were and I could kind of see them in the face. I could look at them in the face and say, I could feel their connection or whatever. And it made me feel comfortable. Like I was talking to people that I could see. The memoir was like completely scary. It was much scarier thinking about having it out there in the world. And eventually I felt like my whole story is about seeking the truth. And to tell it as fiction felt like a betrayal of that narrative.
Yeah. That's so interesting. I would think that so many people would find it the reverse, that this thing you talked about with your show. I know as an actor, when I act on stage, it's easy for me to do something because it's fiction. But whenever I have to do something that is about me, like a solo cabaret show, for example, that is very anxiety provoking because you feel so vulnerable on stage. So it's interesting that you say that, because I think for me, writing something, I can just put it out into the world and I don't have to see what their reaction. I think, and then for you, you actually gain comfort from actually seeing what people's reaction. I think that speaks so much of who you are as a person.
This just occurred to me as you were saying this. I don't know if there's like a connection with adoption or not, but with adoption, you like put your baby out in the world and you have no idea where it goes. You have no idea
Right.
who's reading it, taking care of it, living with it, whatever, and you can't see it. And there's something very anxiety provoking about that. And I think
Uh,
I feel that way a lot about my book. Like, I don't know where my baby's going. I don't know where my book is going. I don't know who's doing what with it. You know, it's like, I don't know. It's, I don't know. It's also vulnerable, but in a different way.
Yeah. And you mentioned how things would happen in your life that made you have to shift the story, or at least, okay, now I've got more to add. At one point, did you say, okay, it's like I'm obviously I'm going to keep living my life. My life isn't going to end. So for this book, so what made you say, okay, it has to end here?
Yeah, it was, I mean, 30 years is a long time. So part of it was like, I just felt like I cannot go any further with, and just keep pulling back on this book. I had the opportunity, um, I had the opportunity to submit it to a new imprint with Ohio State University. And I thought, okay, I'm just going to throw out the book proposal here. It's like now so unwieldy. I don't even know what to do with it. It's a million pages long. But I did make a proposal.
Yeah.
I sent it to them. They were interested in, and I was like, I can't say no to this. It's going to just feel so bad to be working on this book. And I'm sure people in this space will understand the discomfort when people are saying, how's your book going? How's your writing going? How's your book? And you really are in kind of a, I don't know, awkward place to answer that. And I felt like and for all the 30 years, I was like, well, it's going, it's going. Let's
Yeah.
change the subject. How's the weather?
Right.
How's your dog? How's your whiny cat?
Right. So yeah, you get tired of answering the same. It's coming,
Yeah.
it's coming.
Yeah. But also then I had this huge unwieldy thing that I had submitted to the publisher, and they were like, oh, Susan, we really love your writing. We think this is a really compelling, great story. We want to publish it. But, you turned in this thing of, okay, 110,000 words. And we like to put books that are around 60,000 words.
Oh, wow.
You just cut 50,000 words. Like, this is almost,
Yeah.
right? Almost
Right.
half of the book. And that was an incredible challenge, but it was also exactly what the book needed. I had just been like, it was like the kitchen sink. I was throwing everything in there and kind of like, well, if it's in my life, it's in my memoir, and that's
Yeah.
that's not the case. It's like, it has to be under the umbrella of theme, it has to be
Right.
part of the theme. And I think, like, when did you know? So part of it was the opportunity, and part of it was, I really had this feeling, it was so, I don't know, intuitive. It was so internal. And I was like, this is the end. This is the end. I know this is the
Good.
end. I'm done. This is the end of the book. This is the end of this part of the story. And I think until that point, I had felt like wherever I end it is completely arbitrary. I could end it here.
Right.
I could end it there. It was sort of like I could stop at any point, but it never really felt like a true ending. It just felt like, and that was that. And then we all know the story goes on, but it just felt like I was chopping it off at some arbitrary point.
Yeah. I think that's a comfort to know for emerging writers out there, that there are times when you don't know how it's going to end, but it did finally come to you, right, Susan? You
It did,
finally
and it was
felt like, yeah.
really, yes, it did come to me, and it was really strong. It was
Oh,
like,
okay, good.
it was kind of unmistakable for me, and I felt like it could not end in any other way, in any other place, and this is it.
Wow.
I was so
Wow.
relieved. I was like, oh, well, that took long enough.
Yeah. Susan, Rowena mentioned before that so I'm going to say it again because it bears repeating. So your memoir was a finalist for the 2024 William Soroyan International Prize for Writing. It was a finalist for the 2023 National Book Critics Circle Award, and it was named one of 2023's best memoirs by Library Journal. So it's amazing accomplishments. And you can assume that the book was well worth writing, but you talked about some barriers to writing it. And
Oh, right.
self-doubt surely is one of those. And so did you ever ask yourself, is this book really worth all this time and energy? I mean, does your story matter? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Definitely. Um, I've been thinking about this a lot, and we all have these internal voices, these bad voices that come to us as we're writing our books. And I would say there were three very unhelpful messages that kept
Mm,
echoing in my head as I was writing or not writing the book.
okay.
And one was indulgent. This is so self-indulgent.
Uh,
You're writing about yourself. Who cares? Me, 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 me.
mm,
And I just felt like I should be writing something important. I should be
mm,
writing something, I don't know what. I mean, I should be writing something, yeah, important with a capital I. And I felt like it was indulgent with a capital I. Uh, Another one was, and this makes me really sad that this was like booming in my mind for so long, was pathetic. Your story is
oh,
pathetic. You're so
wow.
sad, you're so whiny, just like Dominic's cat. And you're, you're just like, you're whining and like, oh, somebody love me, or I want to find my family, or I don't know, whatever. I just was like very judgmental of my own self. I was
Hmm.
judgmental of, having emotional needs, of having emotions, period. And so part of me was very, very critical of that, so what was it? I was
Yeah.
indulgent, pathetic, and one more thing. I was some other not important. I don't know. I can't remember, but those were like the two big things. And when I could get caught up in that voice of, why are you even doing this? And I would feel
Hmm.
ashamed. I felt ashamed of writing the story,
Mm,
and horrible. I I kind of wanted, so those were some of the biggest internal obstacles.
yeah.
And the big internal obstacles was I just really did not believe that the stories was worthwhile. And
Yeah.
since the book has come out, I actually took some, I don't know if you want me to answer this now, but since the book
Go
has
ahead.
come out, I never would have dreamed that people would have had the reactions that they have. And if I could have read any of these during these 30 years, I don't know what I would have done. I think it would have been very encouraging. And, people who love me and care about me were like, oh, so many people are just waiting to hear your book. It's going to really help people. I'm like, no, you're just saying, like, especially my husband. My husband has
Sure.
been and continues to be my greatest cheerleader, and was like, honey, you got to get this book out. It's such an important story. It's so beautifully written. It's so this, it's so that. And I was like, yeah, you have to say that. You're married to me. You have to say that.
Right.
You love me. But I didn't really believe it. I was like, yeah, you and, my 3 friends and now my 30 friends at the grotto. Yeah, you're all cheering me on, but nobody else out there cares. Right.
Hmm.
And so since then, it's been almost a year. It'll be a year next week that the book is out.
Yeah.
And I printed out all the emails that people have written to me. Um, and it was just sort of taking, and it's actually good that I did that, because I don't remember getting half of these emails. I mean, it was
Yeah.
just like, it was like in a blur. I was in a haze, but people, people really connected with it and said, um, I heard from adopted people, which I was hoping and sort of expecting that adopted people would resonate with it, but also other people. I am also Japanese American, raised in a white town. And then I'm an adoptive parent. Reading your story is helping me be a better parent. Oh, and then, like, I
Mm,
wasn't expecting anyone to have my exact situation, because it felt so, I don't know, unicorny. And so
yeah.
you're like, what else? So I get this email. I am also
Yeah.
a half Japanese adoptee born in 1957. Your book held a great emotional resonance, and it's so rare to come across half Japanese adoptees. What? Tell me about it. So
Wow.
since last year, 4 half Japanese adoptees have written to me, and it's like been incredibly shocking. And then somebody else wrote, your story resonated on so many levels. I was conceived by donor sperm, and I grew up with a sense of secrecy. And they didn't realize this until they were an adult. So adopted people, not adopted people, people who thought about these things, people who, oh, I cried over the moments that you thought of turning your car toward oncoming truck for a different set of reasons. So people who have felt despair, people who have dealt with family estrangement, people who have dealt with secrets, people who have dealt with all kinds of things that really are not my exact situation at all, but there was something in it that
Yeah.
resonated for them. And to understand this, it's been the greatest gift and the greatest healing for me as a writer. You know, as a writer, really believed, like, who cares about my story? Well, as it turns
Right.
out, to people. And
A lot of people.
I would never have ever imagined that.
I mean, that's just incredible. And I'm glad that you printed out those stories because I think we're similar. I think a lot of people are similar in that it's very, very easy to remember the bad things or the difficulties or like the critics, someone who didn't like this about our story or this. It's very easy to remember that. And it's very hard to hold on to the positives that people, so it's great to print those out and read those. Have you run into people, and you've been lucky enough to be able to get out and tour the country as well, to go to various events? Have you met people too that have given you good feedback as well?
Oh my gosh. Yes, at every one, at every single
Wow.
one, people have come up and said shocking things to me. I mean, things that I
Okay.
just, for people have come up crying, people have come up and
Wow.
hugged me, people that I don't know, people that I do know. I mean, one thing that's been really interesting is a lot of people have showed up from my past. My high school
Mm.
English teacher came to one of my readings in New Jersey, which was like one of my life achievements. You know, Miss Casey, oh my gosh, Miss Casey read my book. And for her, as an English teacher, it was a life achievement to have one of her students writing a book. So it was just like this amazing thing to see her. But there were a lot of people who knew me during various parts of the book and said, I had no idea you were going through this. I had no idea this was happening for you. And
Yeah.
that, you know, that was also very illuminating and
Yeah.
meaningful too, that, you know, it's very personal. And all of a sudden, here's my personal private life out there.
Yeah.
But people responded with a lot of heart and a lot of compassion, and it just has meant so much.
So there's a flip side to sort of bearing your life on stage or on the page, because your life also intersects with other people's lives, right?
Mm.
And you are sort of also telling a little bit about other people's stories. And I know that you mentioned in your memoir that you tried as hard as you could to really protect people's identities as much as you could. But at a certain point, people are going to know things about other people. Can you talk a little? I know we didn't discuss this ahead of time, but it just kind of popped up. I think it is very interesting in terms of writing memoir. Can you talk a little bit about that process of like, how do I protect these people, or what do I reveal, or will there be consequences to telling really other people's stories?
Well, I think that was one of the biggest things that I wrestled with, both in the
Yeah.
long writing of the book and certainly since it's been out. Um, there have been consequences, and they've been hard ones.
Mm,
But I still don't regret it. And I think all I can say is I've done my best. I've done my best to treat everyone in the story with compassion and respect, and as much anonymizing as I've been able to do. I think in retrospect, maybe I could have done more. It's possible. I have thought of some ways in which I could have done more, but unfortunately, it's too late for that right now. But I mean, all I can say is I did my best, and I tried to portray everyone with, compassion and respect. And this was not a revenge novel or revenge memoir. I wasn't doing it to try and expose anyone or hurt anyone or, get back at anybody for anything. And I really hope that I think I've received a lot of feedback. Somebody else wrote in one of these emails that, you were able to present your situation without bitterness. And I was really incredibly gratified to read that, that at least for that reader, at least for that one reader, it came through that way. Yeah. And there have been consequences that haven't been fun, but I don't regret it at all.
I'm glad you don't. I mean, we as writers, we know that writing is many things. It's political, it's protest, it's vulnerability. So everything that we do as writers has consequences, really. So
yes, and everything is political. Yeah,
everything's political. Yeah.
Oh, I think.
Oh, go ahead.
No,
Go ahead,
I mean,
Sophie.
I think one of the themes of this rooted and written, or maybe rooted and written overall, is like writing in times of crisis.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I grappled with, along with pathetic and indulgent, was, there's so many big things going on in the world. Who cares about this very personal story? But as I wrote it, and as the story came into itself, I began to see that I was writing about what I consider important themes of racism, reproductive justice, reproductive stigma,
Absolutely. Oh my gosh.
history, incarceration, Asian American identity. There are like a lot of buckets and a lot of themes that I hold very close to my heart that could be considered political, and that they're embedded in the story, and that you can't write about almost anything without having this context. This context is always there. And so I have felt reassured and also like really embraced that there are themes in the book that are much larger themes than my little life that are there, and that I take opportunities to speak out about when I'm able to.
That's such a huge takeaway for our fellows, is that you were combating the sense that your story was so small because it was about you, but you live in the greater world and you intersect in the world in so many huge ways. So it is a big story. It's a story about you, but it's a story about how you inhabit the world. So let's switch gears a little bit, Susan, and talk about the more practical side of writing a book. You touched a little bit on about it, but let's talk about how the book came to be published, how you found your publisher, and sort of the pre-pub process, pub, and then because it's a journey, right? I mean, you wrote the book, but the journey doesn't end there. So talk a little bit about that. Tell people what to expect.
Right. Well, and you and I have had conversations too about the difference between publishing with a very small press, as I did, a small academic press, versus a larger press like you did, and that, that experience is very different. I pretty much knew from the beginning that I was only going to query small independent presses or academic presses, because this book is so vulnerable to me. And I wanted to have as much control as I possibly could. And I had this belief that the smaller the press, the more control I would have, and the more of a personal relationship I would have with editors and things like that. And
So no agent, right, Susan, for this
I
book?
had no agent. I had no agent. And so I mentioned in my bio that I was the editor of an anthology called A Ghost at Heart's Edge, Stories and Poems of Adoption. It was a literary anthology around adoption. And I edited that like 20 years ago. I think it was 1999. It was more than 20 years, like 1999, many years ago. And one of the contributors was this writer named Joy Castro, and Joy Castro was an adoptee, has an amazing story, wrote her own memoir called The Truth Book, and which I love that title and the book. And we stayed in touch. You know, I remember, you know, I was editing this anthology and it all happened with paper, and would submit things with an envelope and a self-addressed stamped envelope. Sometimes when you would submit something to a journal or a magazine or anthology, and you put in the self-addressed stamped envelope with your little submission and your cover letter.
Right.
And I, as an editor, had these giant shopping bags filled with submissions. And my co-editor and I would pass the shopping bags back and forth over the bay. And I think about it now, and I'm like, oh my goodness, that was like the dark ages. But we did back then. And so through that submission to that anthology, I came to know Joy Castro. So then her book came out, and I hosted a book event at my house. Here's an adoptee writer. I didn't know many adoptee memoirists at the time, and I loved her memoir. And then we were in contact, and then an AWP came up, and she wanted to do a panel about family trouble, memoirists writing about family. And so I was on the panel, and then that panel turned into another anthology. Anyway, it's as you see, so my story is, and the thing that I want to come across is the people that you meet today in this room could be somebody that does an anthology, or you can do an anthology and you could put it out to your rooted and written cohort, and you start having these relationships and these connections that will go on for decades. And you don't know, in 20 years, so-and-so is, you know, now heading up an imprint at some publishing house, and you met them at Rooted Written, and they're like, I know you from Rooted and Written. And then you have this incredible contact. So Joy Castro ended up starting an imprint at Ohio State University called Machete Press. And he put it out on Twitter, or put it out somewhere, that she was starting, you know, to be heading up this press. And, you know, that little door opened, and she said, are you working on something? I said, oh, I've got this big mess of a thing. But yeah, so I sent the big mess of a thing, and lo and behold, you know, Joy said, I love this. This is great. I'm going to send it to my editor-in-chief. And then there we go. It just kind of went from there. But I think that, you know, but this connection started 25 years ago. You know, and who knew then that it would lead to this book actually coming out into the world. It took a long time, but a real and I don't call it networking. You know what I mean? It's not, I mean, networking sounds kind of gross. I don't know what it sounds like.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's making connections with people, and it's so easy as, it's easy for writers to be in a silo, and many of us are introverts anyway. So for those of us in the grotto, and for all of you Rooted and Written fellows, you already know the importance of making community, or else you wouldn't have, you know, applied to do this program. And it is so important. I mean, I knew this as an actor and as a musician, that gigs come because of you're top of mind with other people. You know, you have to be in the room, you have to show up to things, you have to, you know, I mean, I think that's my advice to people, is to show up for other people too, because all those you never know where those connections lead to, right? And so yeah, and You mentioned, Susan, the difference between small press and bigger press. Can you tell me a little bit about what Machete Press did for you during the publication process and what you had to sort of provide for yourself?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. One thing they didn't provide very much of was money.
Hmm.
Small businesses don't have big pockets. And
Yeah.
so, but I wasn't looking that this, what I really wanted was to get my story out in the world, and I wasn't looking to like fund my mortgage or anything like that. That wasn't quite realistic. Um, but what they did was they provided me, oh, I started out saying that I knew that I wanted a small press because
Yeah.
it's a vulnerable book. They provided me with a lot of support, emotional support, as well as
Oh,
editorial support. My editor took such care with my manuscript, and not
that's great.
only helping me like decide about what things, what 50,000 words to cut, which was a lot, what to cut, what to put where, how to start it, how to, all these things, a lot of structural things, as well as tiny little paragraph things. They were like, well, you mentioned this in paragraph in chapter 8, but really you're contradicting something you wrote in chapter 2. I'm like, ooh, oops. But since I had written this over so many years, there were
Yeah,
inconsistencies. So they
of
really
course.
helped me with that, but they also helped me when I was struggling with, I don't know about this part. I don't know if I can talk about this. I don't know if I don't know. They just held me. Do you know what I mean? There were a lot
Hmm.
of parts of the book that made me feel very nervous and anxious,
Hmm.
and they just held me. And they were like, is this important for you? Why is this important? How can we make it feel safe? I heard that one of the keywords, one of the prompt words was safe. And
Yeah.
uh, I felt safe in their hands. And that was amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, so I'll go back a little bit. When I
Hmm.
first met my series editor, it wasn't Joy, but the editor above her, um, they were at AWP. They had a small booth at the AWP book fair. And AWP is the Association of Writers and Writing Programs, massive conference that happens every year, like 10 to 15,000 writers. It's just a madhouse. It's going to be in LA in March. But I went to AWP and I went to the book fair and I met the person from Ohio State. And I literally kept coming to AWP every year for like 9 years to be like,
Wow.
hi, it's me, it's still
Wow.
me. I have this book. And they're like, you're still interested in us. I'm like, yeah, it was kind of like checking in, like, I'm still interested in you. Are you still interested in me? And at one point, this I think might be the difference between a small press and a big press is this main editor said, we are interested as long as it takes you. And we
Wow.
have somebody that we wrote a contract with, or we said yes to their proposal, and it was like 13 years ago. And I'm like, what? And they just said, we're patient, and we believe in you, and we believe in your story, and we want to publish it. And they said to me, I think, this book could go with a big public. You could have gotten a big publisher, and we're really
Right.
happy that you came to us. And it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
maybe I could have made a 10 more money or whatever, but I was just afraid that vulnerability of having, my baby out there in the world. Um, I will never regret going with this small
Yeah.
press.
And that is the flip side, right? That they have that patience because and we discussed this being at one of the big five, they are not patient. It's like your book didn't sell several thousand in 4 weeks, then you're done. So that is the flip side. But in terms of publicity and promotion, Susan, you did such an incredible job promoting this book. And I would have to imagine that because of financial constraints, that the majority of that did not come from Machete Press, that was you really hitting the pavement. I mean, what are some of your favorite things that you did to promote? You did so much. I mean, you were everywhere.
Well, two of the things, I just lost my train of thought. Okay. What did I do? Oh, yes, I hired a private publicist for 6 months.
Right.
And she ended up doing a lot that I did
Okay.
not have contacts. I didn't know some of these people. She, I think, connected me with Library Journal and
Mm,
and a lot of podcasts and people who were interested in publishing essays that were related or outtakes from the novel. I mean the memoir, because remember I had to take out 50,000 words, and some of these were standalone pieces. So she
yeah.
really helped me to place some of those in Agni and the Rumpus and several other places that she was able to say, this book is coming out in November, and we have these pieces that are, companion pieces. Are you interested? So she really helped place a lot of my companion pieces. And
Got it.
yeah, and I think I gave Machete, they were great at sending out ARCs, advanced reader copies. And so when anybody was interested at all, I would send an email to the press saying, can you send them an ARC? And they always did. So they were really
Yeah.
good at that. They were really good at helping to set up some bookstore events and things like that. So
Yeah.
one of the things around the book tour was I tried to anchor things that I couldn't do anything about the dates. Like AWP last year was in Kansas City. And so I knew I was going to go to Kansas City to go to AWP. So then I scheduled Chicago and
Mm,
Iowa and other places around there that I knew. I was like, I have to be at AWP in whatever the dates were, X dates. And then I was going to Brown for this adoption conference that I was also speaking on a panel. And so those were like my two big anchors. So it's like, okay, I'm going to be in the Midwest for AWP, and I'm going to be in the Northeast for this adoption conference. And so then
right.
I scheduled everything around those. And then I was like, and then I want to go to New York on this date. So there were things that I couldn't change the dates. And so I tried to be
Mm,
flexible around those
no, it's great.
conferences and
This-
doors, also like organizations. Like there's um, a Korean adoptee organization in New York City called AKA, also known as, and they sponsored an event which was amazing. And so just like thinking beyond bookstores
Mhm.
for other kinds of, uh, I know you went on a cruise ship. That's like
Yeah, I did.
way beyond a bookstore. So I think,
You,
going
yeah.
beyond the standards, because bookstores, you know, they're limited. And there's the other
Hmm.
thing I learned was the amazing resource of libraries. I had no
Yes.
idea that libraries were so awesome and so beautifully funded. Like, so if you go to a bookstore, they don't pay you. You're just trying, or you're hoping to sell some books at the bookstore.
Right.
Libraries often will have a little stipend,
Yeah.
and a big stipend. There's one library in Alameda. They always partner with poets and writers, and so they double their stipend, and it's beautiful. It's like, thank you. They
Yeah.
check and you sell books. So
Yeah.
I was unaware that libraries were such wonderful public spaces and wonderful things for authors. I know there's a
They are.
thing out there that where people are like, oh, we don't like libraries because people will read your book for free, but they don't buy it. I mean, I think that's nonsense.
Yeah.
I am such a fan of libraries, and I feel like, if my book can be on hold and many people will read it, that'll just make me so happy. I don't care how many of them are purchased by individuals. So I
Yeah.
love.
Agreed. Yeah. It's why we write, right? Yeah, well, I mean, that's a question that every author has to answer for themselves. Why do you write? Is it to make a living, to sell a lot of books? That's certainly valid, but I think for us, it's just getting our words out there and sharing our stories with people. So libraries are a big part of that.
Yes. I mean, I think that's like it's like a lottery, you know,
Yeah,
to make enough on your writing that you could support yourself. And I just feel like that's a dream.
it's a
And
dream.
it's a dream, but it's also, it feels to me like a burden. Do you know what I mean? If you're really
Yeah,
relying on that, if you're really relying
yeah,
on your writing to support your entire life,
yeah,
that's a lot of responsibility. I'd rather write to get the stories out there,
yeah.
connect with readers.
Um, and you said something, I will give one tiny little piece of advice that I learned when doing your promotion for your book is do we need to stop? No.
No. I was just asking Rowena here, who's still here.
Oh,
We are doing Q&A, or we're just
oh,
going
are
to
we doing Q&A?
end. If I was just, we could finish up our last few points here, but I was just
Yeah,
doing.
yeah, yeah. And really quickly, what I was going to say, that one trick I learned is when setting up panels, or if you have any say in panels, try to align yourself with people who are much more established than you, because they bring in already an audience, an established audience, to then discover you as a new author. So you kind of, tag along with them. Okay, so if we're going to do some Q&A, let me ask you a couple final questions, Susan.
Okay, sure.
Um, Here's a quick one. Because we're doing rooted and written, if you could give one piece of advice to emerging writers of color, what would that be?
Okay, I cheated a little bit. It's a two-part advice.
A
One is
two-parter, okay.
a two-parter, but very brief. One is believe that your story matters. Your story matters. All of your stories
Yeah,
matter. And
yeah,
you might have this chorus of nonsense like I did in my head for all these years, but just quell that. I'm looking now at this beautiful piece of calligraphy in here. It's called Quell
mm,
All Givings. Just quell it, quell it away, and let it take as long as it takes. You might
love
not want to wait
that.
as long as me, but I mean, just like, don't be impatient, just let it marinate and let the story be the rich and many layered story that it's meant to be. So
I love that.
that's that.
That's good. That's great. And Susan, what are you working on next? The eternal question for writers. What's coming
Yeah.
up next for you?
I am working on two novels that I wrote
Wow.
during NaNoWriMo many years ago.
Oh,
Like
wow.
the issue with NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month, where you're supposed to produce a novel in 1 month, is that
1 month.
it's usually a pile of crap. It's usually,
Right.
it's so messy because you're just like, I gotta get my words out.
Yeah, I mean, it
My
should be.
words out.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I have two very messy NaNoWriMo novels, and it is
Okay.
my sincere goal to polish them, make them good. One of them is a young adult and the other is a historical novel. And I really want to get these done.
Oh, well, I hope you do, because we want to read the next Susan Kiyo Ito piece of work. And then I know you're there with them in person, but for people who are viewing you virtually, where can people find you? And I know in chat, I will put this in the chat. Your
You find me at
website.
thesusanito.com. And I know that seems like a funny website, but I used to have susanito.com, and because of a credit card, my credit card was compromised, and my website did not get renewed, and it got taken away from me. And then somebody tried to scam me and make me pay like $6,000 to get it back. And I'm just like, I don't think I need that. So then I made thesusanito.com.
The Susan Ito. Okay. But I know you're on socials too. You're on Instagram. Are you on TikTok as well?
Gosh, no, I'm so bad at TikTok. I really need a TikTok tutor because I'm very bad at it. I just joined Threads a couple months ago, so whatever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm on Threads. I'm on LinkedIn, which is
Hmm.
surprisingly
It's very active these days, LinkedIn,
very
actually.
active. I think
Yeah,
when a lot of people jumped ship from X, they went to LinkedIn, and I
to
actually really
LinkedIn.
because, you know, there's
Yep.
less like, this is what I had for lunch, this is my cat, and, you know, actual real professional stuff out there. So I recommend LinkedIn, actually. And Lizette
Yeah.
Wanzer, who is a fabulous teacher here at the Grotto, has taught a class called LinkedIn for Writers, and I learned so much. It's really good.
Wow.
And I
Oh,
think
wow. I should
that
take that class.
writers can do a lot on LinkedIn without
Wow.
a lot of the extra noise. A lot of the other places are very noisy.
Yes, that's true. Yeah. Okay. Q&A. How does this work? How should we do
Work.
this? You have a couple minutes.
Hi, everyone. I'm back. So what you can do if you have any questions is you can post it in the Q&A if you're logging in remotely. And if you're here, you can go to your Yap app and post your question in the social feed. And I will read them to Susan and
Oh,
Dominic.
okay.
There's
Great.
a Yap app with a social feed. Who knew? Oh my gosh.
So we were just waiting for the first questions. Let me see here. There should be a Q&A, yes. And so far, no open, nothing here.
Q&A. Let's see. Okay. Okay.
Questions for
Don't be shy. Let me see if I have a question
or
while we wait
Dominic,
to.
since Dominic is here too. And Dominic, you have the app too. Yes? Okay.
Oh, right. I do.
And on
Yeah.
your
Okay.
feed.
So
I was thinking, I wonder if
social
someone
feed.
could, like run to the room and
Oh. Let me see.
Oh, did we get one? Oh,
oh, really?
Yeah.
oh yeah. Okay.
Susan, you said you were trying to protect others from your story. Were you protecting the reader or those in the story? Oh, that's interesting. I don't think I'm
Mm.
worried about protecting readers. I mean, I think readers are, well, one, I don't know who they are, and they're grown-ups and whatever. It's more protecting those in the story, protecting people that I was writing about or not writing about. There were people that I didn't write about, and there were people that I did and tried to disguise as much as possible. So yeah, thank you. Thank you for that question.
Yeah, and in the Q&A, Youngwon Choi says, "Can you what were the ways to protect others?" Yeah, while staying honest to your story. You anonymized some people you mentioned. Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, thank you for that question. It was mostly trying to anonymize as much as possible. I definitely changed names, but changed places, changed a lot of detail, left things out, combined people. Yeah, try to do as much. And like I said, I felt like I could have done more in retrospect. I was like, oh, I could have gone further with that. And I think I would have encouraged myself to know further if I knew then what I know now. So, but it's a little too late for me for that. But it's like, I think you can really go far with this disguising and anonymizing.
It looks like there
Yeah.
might
Well,
be,
hindsight's 2020.
Oh, should I click one of these? Well, I
you can
answered
just,
this one.
oh, okay. Then here's another one from Danica.
Okay. Hi, Danica. The question from Danica is, what were some things that helped you keep going through the 30-year process of writing this book? Well, I mean, things that really kept me going was community. Being part of many writing groups, being part of the Grotto. I can't tell you how much on our listserv at the Grotto, we have these like emails of despair of like, I'm giving up, this is it, I've been working on this for so long, or I've been sending my book out, or I've been this, I've been that, and then the community just gathers around that person and lifts them up. And I have been lifted up by so many individuals and also lifted up by community, by groups of individuals. And, when we're feeling down, and as writers, there are many moments when we're feeling really discouraged and really down. And I think community is all, and you are all starting a community right here, right now. And I think at least one person, if not many people in this room, are going to help lift you up in the future. I know that.
So 5 more minutes.
Okay, 5 more minutes. One more question.
Okay.
This is from.
Okay, I'm going to read this. Sabrine, my question is about the possible bitterness revenge piece of the memoir. Do you feel it is important to wait until you come to a place where you can write without feeling bitterness Or is it just as important to write through the bitterness, anger, revenge in your drafts? That is such a good question. I think it's important to write honestly through all those things. And maybe, so there's a big difference between writing and publishing, right? There's a big shift that happens. When I got to the point where I knew this is my final draft, this is the one that's going out in the world, that's when I tried to, sort of like salting your eggplant. That's when I started to salt the eggplant to like leach the bitterness out of the manuscript.
Oh my God. I
It just
love
gives me.
that. That's amazing.
So,
That's your next how to write a memoir book.
yeah,
Salting the egg.
right, Glenn, yes. But I felt like it was important to be honest about all the bitterness and anger and hurt throughout the writing, all the drafts. It's like that when you're writing early drafts, it's not the time to be censoring yourself. It's not the time to be protecting people or to whatever, you know, there's that whole thing, right? As if everyone's dead. Well, everyone's not dead. And I let it all out in many, many of my earlier drafts. And then when I knew this was it, I was like, I want to be fair. I want to be fair. I want to be honest, and I want to be fair. And people will come to their own conclusions, and people have come to their own conclusions. So, yeah. Okay.
Do you have time for one
Sure,
final
I
question?
do, yeah. How do you feel like your fiction writing shaped your memoir? And how has your memoir writing shaped your fiction writing? Oh, that's great.
Great.
I think my fiction writing, for anyone who reads my memoir, you'll see I am like, people are like, oh my God, your scenes are so vivid and detailed. And I feel like I really, really practiced scene writing. I mean, I'm like all over the scene writing, and I think vice versa. So I think I have yet to see how my memoir writing will impact my fiction writing, but I hope, you know, emotional resonance, emotional honesty. I'm hoping that it will go the other way as well. I hope. We'll see.
Yeah.
Okay, we're at time, I think.
Okay.
Dominic.
Thank you, Susan.
This was wonderful.
This was wonderful.
I'm gonna go say hi to the fellows now in person, but thank you so much for the conversation. I loved every minute of it.
Me too. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Rowena.